All right, well, enough of that. So I hope you enjoyed that content, the Winsome November content. I'm trying not to sacrifice the message because I think what I'm saying is correct. I wouldn't say it if I didn't, but I'm trying to change how I say it just to see where it goes. You know, you might think, oh, it's a big joke, and there is, of course, a joking aspect to it, but it's serious stuff. I think that video is very good. Feel free to share it with anybody that you want that maybe you're afraid to share my normal content with. But anyway, I wanted to talk about something, and this is something that I've noticed a lot online, a lot. And I'm not the first one to notice this. And whenever I notice something that I think is a negative thing online, what I try to do, and this I'm not always successful at this, but what I try to do is make sure that I'm not projecting, if that makes sense, and make sure that I'm looking at myself first, because when I see something in other people, there's a good chance that maybe that's something I don't like in myself. And I think that that's definitely true here. It's definitely true here. And so what I've noticed is the tendency for people to, how should I put this, rage and complain and focus on these big things that they can't control. They have no control over. There's no way for them to really change it. I'm not saying there's no possible way, but it's very unlikely that you're going to change these big things. I think one example that we can use that everyone who watches my channel will remember, will know, is this idea of systemic racism, right? Like it's big, it's systemic, it's in all of our institutions, it's in all of our laws, it's in all of our things, and it's just like, yeah, that sounds very complicated. Like, first of all, I don't believe it until I see the evidence of it. Like, you can't tell me that a law against stealing is a racist law until you can show me the evidence that it is. Or something like that. And so number one, I don't necessarily believe it, but even if it's true, like, that's very big and complicated, right? It's very difficult to change something like that. That's a big ship to turn around. It's like trying to turn the Titanic, right? It's very difficult and pretty much impossible. I'm not saying you don't try to do it, but what I am saying is that there's something more important in your life than attempting to change all these big things that you have no control over. There's something more important in your life than trying to change these big kind of, conceptual things that you really have no control over, because you can't force people to think a certain way. You can't force people's hands. If they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. I saw, relating to the racism thing, I saw there's one guy who I love. His name is, oh my goodness, what is his name? I did a video about this guy, Boyce Watkins. He believes in all the stuff I oppose. He believes in reparations. He believes in systemic racism, all this and that, blah, 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 blah. So I don't agree with him. I mean, I think that he's wrong about a lot of things, right? But what I love about Boyce Watkins is that his solutions are always things that you can control. He talks to black people. He says, black people, you deserve reparations. You deserve all this repayment for all the systemic oppression that you've experienced. But guess what? You ain't gonna get it. You ain't gonna get it. So what you gotta do is take what you do have, the ability to get income, this tremendous wealth that blacks in the United States have. I mean, if you total up the wealth and the income that blacks have in the United States, it's bigger than the GDP of a lot of countries. So you've got a lot of power. Your money is your power. And so what you should do is be faithful with that. Now, he's not a Christian. So when he says faithful, what he means is start investing. Even if it's a couple bucks a day, start investing. Stop consuming more than you take in. Consume less than you take in. Have a budget where you don't spend every dollar you get. Stop buying Jordans. Stop doing this. Like, that's his advice, and I think that's fantastic advice because it focuses on those things that you can control. You'll never be able to control whether or not you get reparations, right? But you can control what you do with your income. No matter how big, no matter how small, you can control what you do with your income. I like that a lot. That's the right attitude. You see, the tendency is for us to focus and rage at things that we can't control, and often we use it as an excuse not to do the things that we should be doing. You see what I'm saying? Like, and again, I'm talking to myself here. This is something that I tend to do. I talk and I rage and I get angry about all these things. So here's what got me thinking about this. I saw a lady talking online on Facebook or Twitter or something, and she was very upset because her children, or one of her children, he was being bullied in school, right? Being bullied in school. Awful. Awful. There's nothing more enraging than watching a video of a kid being bullied in school. I hate that stuff. I hate it. And so bullying is a problem, right? And so this person's going to go to the principal, have a meeting. She's very upset, and she's asking for prayers. Okay, great. Prayers are good. This is all good so far, right? We want to be against bullying. We're angry that bullying happens. We want to pray for people that are in situations like that. But let's take a step back for a second. Here's something. You can't control whether your kid's going to be bullied at school. You can't actually control whether the principal does anything about it, because history has shown they don't do anything about it. This is not in their purview. They can't control this stuff. It's not controllable. But there's something you can control in this situation. Why are your kids in this school? Why are your kids in this school? Get your kids out of there. I see, and this is not just for this person, by the way. I see people complaining that transsexuals are teaching their kids in public school. The trannies are there. They're trying to turn our kids into trannies. Okay, fine. That's a good thing to get mad at, right? That's fine. Oh, they're teaching evolution in the school. They're teaching the kids to be suspicious of the parents. They're teaching all this stuff. All of this is good stuff to be upset about. But why rage about that when it's completely within your control to take your kids out of that school? And you might say, well, I don't have the money. I need the income and things. Yeah, but here's the thing, guys. There are things that you can do right now to put yourself in a better situation next year to get your kids out of that school. I'm saying get them out now, but there are steps you can take. Downsize your house, change your job, maybe take a second job, go to your church. I mean, imagine this. If your kid's being bullied at school, get your kid out. Oh, I can't afford it. Okay, go to your pastor and ask for help. They can help you. You see, your pastor should be able to put you in a situation, whether it's with funding, or someone can help you with train the kids, or homeschool groups, or maybe they can help you budget and organize your own family better, because pastors should be able to help with that kind of stuff. There's principles in the Bible that talk about various things about, budgeting and economics and things like that. Like, your pastor should be able to. Have you asked your pastor? Because here's the thing, the school system is one of those big things. See, it's not just liberal people that have problems like this, where they focus on these big things they can't change, like systemic oppression, right? We do it too. Conservatives do it too. Because it's going to be very difficult to change the Department of Education of every state in the United States. I'm not saying you shouldn't try, but what I am saying is those things you don't really have ultimate control over. You can put your effort forward, you can use your strategies and things like that, but I would say it'd be much more effective to just control the things you can control. Do you see what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? Because changing the minds of the Department of Education is very difficult. But getting your kid out of school and organizing your own life in such a way that you can do that is much less difficult. And it's more faithful to God. You see, here's the thing, pastors. I'm going to talk to you for a minute because, I'm not telling you what to do. But a lot of you guys have your kids home. They're homeschooled. A lot of you people have your kids home. They're homeschooled. And there's reasons why you do that. A lot of them are biblical reasons. I'm not saying you should preach from the pulpit, as law, things that aren't law. That's not what I'm going to say. You can only preach that book, and you can only go so far as that book. But man, you should be helping your people, your flock, to figure out how to start being faithful with what they have. The different principles in that scripture that we don't have to just rage online about transsexuals teaching our kids how to have anal sex in school, right? Like that's part of sex ed now. Sodomy is part of sex ed now. So we can rage online about that, or we can get our kids out of that school. It's not right to allow your kid to learn about sodomy when they're, in 6th grade, or even younger. That's not right. You have to protect your kids. You have to teach your kids the way the world really is, the way God says the world is. And it's not going to happen in public school. You see, we've done that experiment. That experiment has failed. Yeah, there's some kids that make it out of public school and become Christians. I'm one of them. There's some kids that make it through public school and never renounce Christ. Okay, that's great. That's fantastic. But the numbers, if you're going to believe the numbers, that's not how it normally goes. So let's give up that experiment, because God has told you what to do with your kids. He wants you to teach your kids what's what. And if you're sending your kids to public school, you're putting yourself behind the eight ball because the school is going to jack them up, right? They're going to teach them other things. And then you're going to have to spend your time at home deprogramming what they learned in school. And that's a very difficult thing. Why not instead do the easier thing? And I would argue the more faithful thing. And just you teach them what's what. You take responsibility for that. Because ultimately you're responsible. Ultimately you're responsible. That's why people rage online, right? Because they know that ultimately they're responsible for their kids. And so they rage at the public schools teaching them about sodomy. But how about instead of that, you do what you know is right? You see, this you can apply this to anything. I've been thinking about this a lot with economics, right? Because I believe in a God that judges nations for their sin against him. So when a nation rebels against God, God judges that nation. And he does it with war. He does it with economic sanctions. He does it with weather. That's what I believe, right? And so I need to start acting like I actually believe that, right? So what does this mean for me? Well, I'm considering I've got money in the stock market, right? And if God's coming in judgment to the United States based on the sin that we have done against him, if that's going to happen, we're going to have economic sanctions. What does that mean that I should do with my money that's in the stock market? It's a serious question. And see, this is the thing, like, do I believe it or not? Do I believe it or not? And what would be the faithful thing if I actually believed it? What should I do? What would be the smart thing, the wise thing, the faithful thing? You see, I like to rage online about things, but I need to be careful that that's not all I'm doing. I also need to be faithful with what I've been given, because rage all day at these things you can't control. If you want to do that, that's like shaking your fist at the sky. But you've got a family that you can control. I saw somebody say this. I'm going to get in trouble for mentioning this guy again, but I'm just going to do it. It's a comedian, Owen Benjamin. I was watching him, and he was talking about this kind of a topic, essentially, this kind of a topic. And he was talking about, all these white nationalists, essentially, that, and you might say he's one of them. I don't know if he is or not. Listen. But he was talking about how, like, they're just wringing their hands about race mixing. Oh, the race mixing is horrible. So if you believe that, right? His question for you, if you actually believe that, so what are you doing? Are you having kids, a lot of white babies? Is that what you're doing? Or are you just wringing your hands online and getting angry and full of anger and despair and sadness? Like, what good is that going to do? See, that's not what you should do. And I'm not worried about race mixing. I'm in an inter-ethnic marriage, right? So obviously I'm not worried about that. But you see my point, though, like instead of just wringing your hands and being frustrated and angry and all this stuff about all these things, and they're all anger-worthy. I mean, trannies teaching kids that are as young as, 4th grade, that you should be angry about that. But make sure that you're being faithful with what you've been given by God. And if your kids are in that school, get them out of there now. Same thing with, like, the SBC stuff, right? I see a lot of people bemoaning this crazy stuff going on in the SBC, right? This black pastor, he got voted no, it's racist, blah, 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 and they're all stepping in. There's back office maneuverings and backroom deals and all kinds of shenanigans. Okay, fine. So you can be angry about that if you want, but are you still participating by giving them money? Stop. Be faithful with what you have. You can't change the direction of the SBC in toto. You can't change people's minds. You can't make people know that, Russell Moore is this shady dude and, like, Al Mohler's not doing anything about it and stuff. You can't force people to believe that. But what you can do is stop participating in it yourself. Be faithful with what you've been given. Don't let a focus on these big things that are very troubling, that you can't control, stop you and use it as an excuse not to be faithful with what you have, the little things that you can control. That's where I think you should focus, and I think that's where ultimately the big things will change as well. That's the ironic part. If you focus on what you have and be faithful with what you have, I think the big things will follow. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. God bless. I meant to use this as an example, but I forgot. But a perfect example of what not to do, right? And this is what not to do. Don't be like this. is to pretend and be all uppity about racial unity, right? Yo, racial reconciliation. We got to get the races together. There's got to be more unity in the Church of Christ. And you're just raging online all day about this in your blog. Every other blog post is about this. All of your leaders are preaching this. Everyone is talking about this. These big ideas. The church needs to have racial unity. And then, when it's like in your control to do it, you don't do it. Gospel coalition, guys, like this is your big problem. You're trying to change all these big things that you can't change. You have no control over people's minds. But then in your own event, when you have a fellowship hour, you segregate it. You say, no, white people don't come to this. You say you want reconciliation. Your actual actions prove that that is a lie. See, control the things you can control. If you really want racial reconciliation, stop focusing on these big things, these big systems, they're esoteric things that you can't possibly change. Instead, how about when you gather together with your women's conference, you just have it. You get together now. You have reconciliation now. You have unity now in your fellowship events. Don't divide them up. Don't segregate them. That's stupid. That's stupid. That's what not to do. You see, be faithful with a little bit. You can't change the systems overnight, but you can change yourself. And so if you want racial unity, you got to actually do it. Have a fellowship event where race is not really considered here. Intentional. You can be intentional about it. There's no race is going to be considered here. We're going to have unity in Christ. That's what really matters. We're going to do that, and we're going to be an example to the world here. We might not be able to change the courthouses and the systems overnight, but we can change ourselves overnight. But instead, you segregate it. And there's your example. That's what's actually being used as an example. That's what not to do. See, focus on being faithful with the things you have, not the things that you don't have. You don't have those power. So stop coveting that. Instead, be faithful with what you have.